Today we welcome Conor Raney, avid outdoorsman and mountain guide here in Pinedale, Wyoming. So Conor, what kind of guiding do you do here in the Wind River Mountains here in Wyoming?
Yeah, so basically what I do is just, it's mountain guiding, fishing guiding, anything that the winds have to offer, basically, that's within reason for safety and whatnot. But typically it's mountain guiding. And
so backpacking or pack trips?
yes, backpacking exclusively. Pack trips, not at all. Horses aren't really my thing, but yeah.
Okay, what's your general work week look like?
So it's usually 4 to 7 day trips, and what we do is we choose a location, and we will go up there and we'll kind of introduce the clients to the area and kind of give a brief background on where we are and what we're going to do, and somewhat of the history of the area as well.
Okay, great. And why do you think your clients choose to have a guided trip instead of going into the mountains on their own?
Well, so the winds have always kind of been known for a very, or the most remote mountain range in the lower 48. And there is a lot of potential danger involved. So I think it's important for them to have someone with them in case there are any kind of issues. And it's also kind of nice to have someone there that knows the area and can give you some kind of fun facts. You know, when I go somewhere else, I like to have that local knowledge and that connection that person has with the land, and kind of and see what they think about it.
So what kind of dangers are they
Oh
facing?
Boy, where do we start? So there's always the risk, as we know, of wildlife. There's grizz, there's black bears, there's mountain lions. There's dangers in that sense, and then there's also the dangers involved with just your own health. You know, rolled ankles, broken bones. There's a lot involved, and it's really hard to say what kind of injury you may sustain, because it could be something that you inflict, or it could be something that someone else inflicts, and so there's just danger is any and everywhere. So it's important to just be safe and have someone with you there that can manage that. So
Great. Okay, so as a native here of Pinedale, Wyoming, can you tell us a little bit of why the Wind River Mountains and western Wyoming are so special?
yeah, so I consider Sublette County to be what America was, and it's really the last remnant of what this area was even before America got established. So there's so much land that is available and remote and open, with no interference, from humans, no anthropogenic evidence at all. You can go and be lost and not see any form of people at all, and I just think that is so special to have that that primitive sense of freedom that, when the first Americans came, they got to feel and they got to witness. So this is just a time capsule of that time era, and I think that's pretty special.
Very cool. So a couple weeks ago you made history by being the first person to circumnavigate the 400 miles of our local Sublette County, which goes through both the Green River Valley and the Wind River Mountains. Why did you do that, and do you think this is going to help you with your guiding at all?
It may or may not help me with my guiding. If it were to, I think it will be because I even have a deeper passion for the area. Doing that whole loop, obviously, it changed my perception again in a very positive way. But if it's going to change my guiding, it's just going to be in the fact that I'll be emitting even more passion. But as far as the reasoning behind it, it's, I think, pretty simple. It's just because it's here, and we can do it, and it's just, it was to settle a lot of curiosity. Here in town you can look in all directions, and you're surrounded by mountains, and you're surrounded by this open land, and you always kind of wonder, what's it like on top of that peak or this peak. And so I really just wanted to settle that curiosity, and I wanted to do it quick, and I think the quickest way I could have done it was just do one big trip, and I decided to follow the line because it goes right through the heart of all the mountain ranges and right through the desert.
Great. So you have a real mental map
Yeah,
of this area now.
I sure do.
So do you feel like the early 19th century fur trade of this region has affected your perception of the area or these mountains or your approach to guiding?
Absolutely. I am fascinated with the history here because their lifestyle was so different. But the thing that is constant between the 19th century fur trappers and that era and today is the landscape and the mountains. So their lifestyle was different than ours today, but the mountains are still here, and they still are the same. And it's just, it is so cool to know that you're interacting with the same mountains and the same rivers and the same streams that those first fur traders did and those first Americans did. And you always wonder, what has this mountain seen, in the past, and what maybe did this trapper think of that mountain, and what trappers were here, and what Indians were here, and that is actually one of the things I probably think about most when I'm up there. Is just the history and who's been there and what they've done, and it's really a mind trip to think about that.
So is that some of the history that you're sharing with your clients then?
Absolutely. It's probably our favorite thing to talk about. If you even one mountain has just a lifetime's full of history, and then you look up and down the range and there's 500-600 mountains. So there's all these stories, and these mountains represent markers in time for certain people, and the kids and the clients, they really just enjoy that kind of perception that they can get out of, because we're stuck in the society today where we're focused on what we're doing, and to be able to think back and try to actually put yourself in those people's shoes is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Would you say your clients they're not local, so they're coming from elsewhere probably, and a variety of age ranges, or?
Yep, there's a variety of age ranges. We can go typically from about 11 years old to 65 or 70. It's all about the client and their abilities and their desires. And regardless, there's something for everybody up here, short or far. There's something here for you. So.
Now, going back to the history route, you have a special connection with local legend Finus Mitchell. Could you tell us a little bit about that relationship and just shortly who he was?
Sure. Yeah, so Finus was from Rock Springs, Wyoming, and he came from Missouri in the late 18 or early 1900s, and he became fascinated with the area, like most of us do when we first see this. And at that point, this area was being fought over with grazing and sheep and cattle. And so Finus was really the one here who made a push for this to be preserved and really made people aware of the public lands that we have here. And my connection to him is my godfather, who's Alvin Mitchell. His grandfather was Finus. So I think, and Alvin, I'm not sure, I like to call him my great godfather, Finus there. So
he's your great godfather.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I'd like to call him that.
Do you share that story with your clients often?
I do, and typically my favorite spot to go is up, near Mitchell Peak, and they enjoy that story and they enjoy that history as well, and they get a kick out of it. So. Now
the mountain men had a history of kind of expanding upon their adventures to kind of. They were really good at storytelling, let's just put it that way. Do you find yourself doing that too with your clients, giving them a little ruse here and there to see if they're paying attention? Or?
Oh yeah. There's plenty of ways to grab their attention. And the campfire, historically has always been the place to go for a good storytelling. But I got a couple tricks up my sleeve to keep these kids on their toes, or whoever. You can always go hide in the bushes, and that's a great thing about knowing the area. You can go around a certain spot and wait for them and kind of scare them. But yeah, the storytelling is a pretty critical part in the experience of the mountains, because that's what the mountains are for, is telling a story, and they always have and they always will.
Now, in terms of a real story, what's the craziest adventure that you've had here in the Wind River Mountains? Good or bad?
Okay, the craziest? You know, that the Sublette County trip was a crazy story in itself, and I could go on and on about that. But I think the one story that really sticks out in my mind that is just so much different than everyone else, or each one else, is there was a time I was going up to Fremont Peak, and I left work at about 7 o'clock at night, so there's still a little bit of sun available for me, and it took me about 3.5 hours to get into Island Lake. But prior to Island Lake, there's this constriction over this little saddle, and of course by this time it's dark, and I have my headlamp on, and I'm alone, and I start going up this little saddle, and I see a light to the side of, off to the side of the trail, and in the back of my mind I went, all right, well, it's either a campfire in the distance or it's another person's headlamp. And I look over and it's a mountain lion sitting about 50 or 60 yards away on a rock, and so I kind of perk up and go, oh my gosh, this is right where this mountain lion wants me to be, in a constriction, and so it had hopped down and it started stalking me on the trail. So I had to get up on a rock and do what they say to do and try to scare it off. But this mountain lion wasn't really being scared off. It was sticking around for a good half hour, and so I continued to yell at it for a while, and finally, when I thought it had gone off into the woods, I continued up the trail and I started setting up camp. And as I was setting up camp, you kind of get that feeling something's watching you. I look back up, and then there's 4 mountain lions, the one that had been stalking me earlier, and 3 more cubs. And right as I'd shown my light on them, 2 went down one side of the rock and then 2 down the other side. And by that time, I hopped in my tent and I'd sat there, hardly breathing at all. And you could just hear the mountain lions kind of walking around the camp and sniffing around. And I stayed very still for a very long time. But they never ended up bothering me. And after about an hour and a half, I kind of peeked my head out, and they were gone. And at that point, I had vomited because my adrenaline had crashed so hard, and it was up for so high. But I didn't hardly get any sleep that night. But I woke up in the morning, and there's paw prints everywhere, and thankfully I made it out all right.
New appreciation for life.
Yes, very much so. It was a rebirth.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Conor. And yeah, if you guys are interested in getting a mountain guided tour, just talk to Conor Raney.